Laura here from Get Organized HQ, and not that long ago I posted a video about the habits of organized people, so I wanted to share with you today the habits of disorganized people. And this may not be what you're expecting. First of all, this is not a video to either make us feel bad about ourselves if we feel like we fit in the category of a little bit more disorganized, and it's not to bash disorganized people. It is just to kind of open your eyes to some things that might be holding you back from organization that you may not have thought of yet. And I also want to say here that I really kind of hesitated to use the word disorganized people because I really don't like to label anyone as organized or disorganized. And it's really not something that's necessarily inherent within you, that you either are or you aren't. I have seen people who lived many years, what most people consider disorganized, and then become organized, and vice versa. This is a skill that anyone can learn. So I hope that as you watch this, you actually feel hopeful. And some of these are really going to surprise you, because I know it might be tempting to think negatively about people who tend to be more disorganized, or if you feel like you fit in that category, it can be tempting to think negatively about yourself. And I don't want that for anyone. That is not how I feel about anyone who's struggling with organization. And that's not how you should feel either. I want you to realize what some of your strengths are, because those people who are a little bit more naturally less organized, they still have so many wonderful strengths. And I want us to celebrate those together and to figure out together how we can go toward more organization. You may find this surprising, but many disorganized people are actually extreme perfectionists. And I know you might be thinking, well, if you're a perfectionist, doesn't that mean that like you always do everything perfectly and your home is perfectly tidy? I know that's kind of what we think of naturally, but actually many times, because we're a perfectionist, we focus so much on doing everything to the best of our abilities that everything that we do ends up taking more time, and there's just not enough hours in the day to stay on top of all of it. So as an example, let's take cleaning the bathroom. If you want to clean the bathroom and you approach it with a perfectionist mindset of like, wow, we're really going to clean this bathroom. I mean, we're going to get out the toothbrushes and we're going to scrub the little lines and it is going to look pristine. Here's what's going to happen. First of all, that is going to take you 3 or 4 times as long as doing just a decent general clean of the bathroom. And so you're only gonna be able to do 1 bathroom versus 3 or 4, or a bathroom and cleaning the kitchen and whatever else in that time. So you're just not gonna get as much done. Also, it's gonna increase the dread factor, because feeling like I have to clean every little part of this bathroom and go through all these steps means that next time when I go to clean it, I kind of dread it more, because wow, it is going to be a big undertaking. So those two things combined mean that the more of a perfectionist you are about certain things, the more actually it breeds chaos and it's difficult to get things done. And one of the things that I do instead, and I actually have an entire video about this concept, if this resonates with you, I'll put the link down below. But instead what I do is I literally say to myself, I'm trying to do a 70% job. I would want to get a C if this were being graded. And by doing that, it then shifts my mindset of like, oh, I'm not trying to, get an A+. We just need to get a C on this. Now, I'm not saying that there's never, ever a time that you might want to do an A+ job on something, but for most things, a C is good enough. And if you really pay attention to organized people, many of them are really, truly doing a C job on many of the things that they're doing, and that is perfectly acceptable. Disorganized people often put things off instead of doing them right away. And I know this is something that I'm pretty guilty of, and really almost anyone, I think, struggles with this from time to time. But in order to stay organized, it's important to do things right away. So especially if it takes less than a couple minutes, do it right away. Or if you have a scheduled time to get something done, go ahead and do it right then, instead of having a discussion with yourself and deciding, well, I could probably do it later. And really, one reason that putting things off ends up leading to a lot of disorganization is not necessarily because putting things off is inherently good or bad, but because it can lead to kind of a negative spiral of when you put one thing off, then it makes it harder to do the next thing, and then that leads into the next thing, and then it just becomes this cycle of leading toward more chaos instead of more order. So like, for example, I think I've used this example a ton of times, but if I don't wash my dishes and then I get up the next morning, or I don't run my dishwasher and then I can't load the dishwasher, and then they pile up and then it gets worse, and it just, breeds this cycle of chaos. Or the same is true if I don't put my clothes away, and then I'm going to get dressed in the morning and I'm like, I need socks, and then I gotta go rifle through them and make a big mess to find the socks, and it just snowballs. Versus if I had folded the clothes when I took them out of the laundry, then I would not have that problem. People who struggle with organization often become what I call clutter blind. That is, that you don't even notice the clutter that is around you. So if you think about it, and you started, with a perfectly clean space, let's say my office is 100% clean, and there's nothing out, and then I leave one paper out. That one paper is actually going to be noticeable when I walk in the next day because it's usually tidy. And then I leave one cup out, and then I leave one more thing out, and then I get another stack of papers. By the time I have 6 or 7 things out of place and I add one more, I barely even notice it. And then the more times I walk into that room that is in a more cluttered state, the less I notice that things are out of place. So it's very, very common to not even notice that there's clutter building around you. And for a lot of us who struggle with organization, we are really good at hyper-focusing on whatever we're doing in front of us. So if we're working on this project, we are not looking at all this clutter that is surrounding us, so we just don't notice it. So one of the things you can do here that I think really helps is to reset your space. So however you have to do it, clear it off. Now, you can't do this with your entire home probably at once, but take a tabletop or a surface and clear it off. Even if you have to just toss it all in a laundry bin and shove it in a closet, which, by the way, I have done that, then it's gonna really reset, and you're gonna notice the huge difference in how clear that space looks, and then pay really close attention, and you will notice as clutter starts to build up, and you can take care of it right away. One problem with staying organized is trying to organize in a way that either doesn't fit the situation or doesn't fit your organizing personality. Some people thrive organizing kind of all at once and making big progress, and some people thrive on doing a little bit at a time. Also, some people prefer systems that are really aesthetically pleasing, where you've got all the matching bins and you've got the labels, and that's really important, and that actually makes it easier for them to keep the space organized. Versus other people, that would actually be a barrier. The opposite would be true. They wouldn't enjoy the process, they wouldn't enjoy putting things away. Instead, they are more functional in how they organize, and they just want all these things to have a space, but it's not important to them that they be in matching jars and that they be labeled and things like that. So understanding your own organizing personality is going to help you so much more in staying organized. And as I've said many times, it doesn't mean that we always have the luxury of working with our organizing style. Like, I am a sunflower. That means I like to organize all at once, but many things just don't work that way. Like, I can't wash my dishes one day a month. So just understanding that helps you realize, okay, this is a place where I have to kind of go outside of what I would naturally do. So how can I work with that and do that the best that I can? So if you're interested in finding out your own organizing style, go ahead and click the link below to take our organizing quiz, and it will tell you what your personality is. Really and truly, many disorganized people are some of the hardest workers I know. And sometimes disorganization can get a bad rap, and people can start to assume, well, that person just must not want to work very hard, or they might be lazy, and that could not be further from the truth. In reality, when you're disorganized, you often end up working harder and expending more energy than an organized counterpart, because you're actually not working that much smarter. Instead, you're working harder. And for example, if I let my dishes sit for 4 or 5 days, then I'm literally gonna have to expend more effort to get it clean, because stuff is gonna be caked on and nasty and icky, and it's gonna smell bad. Versus if I had the habit of, after every meal, washing the dishes, nothing would have time to get caked on and it would take less work. Now that is just one small example, but if you apply that to all the different arenas of life, you're actually working harder. And most disorganized people like to work hard and can work hard. So what you need to do if you feel like you're not organized is work on channeling that work into working a little bit smarter. So being a little bit more efficient. How can I get more done for the same amount of effort? Or possibly you're working so hard that you're getting burnt out and you're exhausted and you need to take a little bit of more time to rest. Disorganized people tend to say yes to things way too easily. And I'm someone who's a people pleaser, and also I have a lot of interest and I want to do a lot of things. So I just want to say yes to everything and take on a ton of projects. But when there's too much going on, it's really hard to do anything well, and even hard sometimes to keep up with those basic tasks of keeping my home tidy and running smoothly. So in order to become more organized, it's important to learn to think a little bit extra before you take on a new commitment or say yes to something, whether it's a self-driven thing like, oh, I want to start this new hobby or take up this new thing, or whether it's external, someone asking you to do something. Think a little bit more and get more comfortable with saying no to things that aren't going to fit into your schedule. And there's lots of ways to say no. Some of it is just no. That's not something that's for me. Sometimes you can also say, not right now. It doesn't fit into my schedule right now, maybe at another time. But this is a critical component of being able to take control of your home and your life, is feeling like you can say yes to the things that really do work for you and no to the things that aren't going to fit. One thing that slows down organizing a ton is being indecisive. And this, I think, is the root of tons of clutter and disorganization, because we spend so much time trying to make decisions, from many of them that don't matter that much. So when it comes to where should I put this new roll of tape that I just bought, you could spend, a long time, 5-10 minutes trying to figure it out and then pick a space, or you could just be like, here's a space, this is where the tape goes. So most organized people are actually very decisive and don't take that long to make those simple decisions that actually don't matter too much. And it's really important to actually make that strong decision. So what doesn't work well is if, I'm not really sure how I'm going to organize my shirts, and so they just keep changing all the time. Or another thing that happens a lot is indecision leads us to just do nothing. So I don't know where to put the tape, so I'm just going to put it here on my kitchen island. And yes, I have literally done this because I couldn't make a decision, and instead it causes me to just keep putting things off. Now, I wish I had like a little magic pill to give you to make you decisive. It is tricky, especially when you're a little bit like me and like to overthink. Then it doesn't come as naturally, but it is something that can be practiced over time. And just being conscious and aware that we want to kind of think about how important is this decision. Like if I was deciding to take a new job or move somewhere, I would spend a little bit more time thinking about the pros and cons and analyzing it. But if I'm just deciding, when I'm organizing my shirts, should I put all the long sleeves together and then the short sleeves, or should I have them like all together? That decision is actually not that important. So I just need to make it quickly and decisively and move on. I am fairly guilty of this one, and this also may be surprising, but disorganized people have too many lists. And you might think, well, isn't making a list like a trait of someone who's organized? And it is in and of itself, but the problem is just having too many. So you just make a list for everything, and you've got a list over here on your phone, and another one on this app on your phone, another one on the computer, and you've got some sticky notes kind of here and there, and you've got a notebook here, and you've got a list here, and you've got something in your car, and then it just becomes too many lists to actually manage. In addition to that, I've had times where I would make a list and then not actually look at it. And here's the thing. You might think, well, that's totally useless. It's not totally useless. The act of making the list can be very helpful just to get things out of your head and onto paper. So it's not useless, but it's far more useful and beneficial if I actually go back and consult that list. So there have been times when I've made like a brain dump, of like everything that I need to do. And maybe I even categorize it, and I literally never looked at it again. So it gave me a little bit of temporary relief. It kind of helped me sort some things out, but it didn't really give me the full relief of that mental burden that it would have if I had known that every day I'm going to go back and check that list. What's urgent now? And I'm going to get those things done. So the important thing is to have a system for your lists so that you don't have all these lists all over the place. So you know where each type of information goes, you know where to go when you need to find it, and that you look back on those lists. Many disorganized people actually speak really harshly to themselves. So you might go in a messy room and say, oh, what is wrong with me? Why can't I keep this room clean like everybody else can? And you just speak really harshly to yourself. But think about it. If you went into a friend's home and it was a big mess, you would never be like, well, what is wrong with you? How come you can't keep it clean and tidy? You would probably think, wow, they have a lot on their plate right now, and cleaning the space isn't a priority for them. You might even offer to help out or tidy something up while you're there. So talk to yourself just like you would talk to a friend who's struggling with organization. The first thing is, it's actually more effective. When we berate ourselves and start to think of ourselves as someone who's disorganized, it just perpetuates the fact that, well, I guess I'm just disorganized. This is how I am. And so it actually makes it harder to become organized versus if you instead tell yourself, okay, I'm struggling right now with keeping this space clean and organized, but I'm someone who can be organized. I just need to learn some new skills. Then you're so much more likely to do it. It's going to feel so much better. And you're just going to be happier. It's not fun to live in a way where you're telling yourself all these things and all this negative self-talk. Instead, make sure that you are talking kindly to yourself as you incorporate changes to become more organized. We all know that having a plan, habits, routines can be very helpful in keeping things running smoothly. But disorganized people tend to view these as restrictive rather than helpful, and they tend to get frustrated or fight back against needing to have a plan. Instead, it's important to change the way that you're thinking about this, and instead of thinking of, oh my goodness, having to, let's say you have a laundry plan and having to stay on this rhythm of doing laundry is really restrictive, it's actually really, really freeing. Because using laundry as an example, if I don't have a routine or a plan, I have to spend all this much more mental energy on when am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? Also, life forces me to do it. So if I see that I have no more, clean, whatever, clothes to wear, clean socks, then that's when I have to do laundry, whether I want to do it or not. Versus when I said, hey, I'm going to do it. First thing in the morning, I'm going to do this. And on Monday, it's going to be towels. Then I got to decide when I did that. Also, when you have rock solid routines, you can skip a day here or there and no one even notices. It's when you don't have those routines and you skip a day or you can't fit it in when you really need to, that you'll really notice. So plans and routines are actually freeing rather than restrictive. Often disorganized people don't really enjoy the process of organizing. And so it makes perfect sense that if you don't really enjoy decluttering, cleaning, tidying, reorganizing a space, then it's going to be harder to remain organized. And there is nothing inherently wrong with naturally enjoying something more or naturally enjoying something less. That doesn't mean one person is better than the other. And most disorganized people have many strengths that an organized person might not. You might love being creative and you might be great at it, whereas an organized person might really, really struggle with that. So there's nothing inherently good or bad about that, but you have to understand that and learn how to work with that. So you're going to need to do two things. Number one, in whatever way you can, try to make the process more fun. So I don't think that you're ever going to wake up one day and be like, I cannot wait to wash my toilets today. I mean, that's one of my least favorite kind of home maintenance jobs, and I'm probably never going to be just truly thrilled to do it and love it to death. But I can do a few things that both minimize the amount of time I need to spend on the unpleasant tasks and actually makes me enjoy them more. For example, this is just me. I find that I do not enjoy much when I am rushed. So when I'm just trying to fit it in wherever I can, I don't enjoy it. Instead, if I set aside an hour on Saturday and I say, this is the time to clean my house, I enjoy it more because I love that feeling of everything being clean. And so when I'm done, everything's going to be clean. I mentally know this is the time that I'm going to be cleaning. And another thing that I do for many of the mundane tasks is I blast some music that I love, or I listen to a podcast or an audiobook, and I just kind of make it me time. So whatever you can do to make yourself enjoy the process more, maybe you can get your family involved, maybe you can invite a friend over. I recently decluttered and organized by far the worst space in my house, probably the worst space that I've ever had in any home I've ever lived in. I had a very out of control, we called it the junk room, it's like the storage room. It was out of control and felt daunting and overwhelming, but I had 3 friends over and we worked together for maybe 90 minutes and you would not believe the progress we made. And also, it made it more fun because we were kind of talking and joking and laughing, and it just took the process that was previously boring and mundane and made it fun. So looking for whatever ways you can to make it fun, looking for ways that are not going to require you to do as much of the stuff that you don't enjoy. So if you love organizing and so you're going to sort everything into little micro categories and label it, that's great, that makes sense. But if you don't love organizing, that's probably not what you should do because you're not going to enjoy that, you're not going to keep up with it. Instead, you should create a system that is much easier to maintain and doesn't require you doing as much of what you don't enjoy. And then lastly, it is important to learn to do the things that we don't love to do, and you're going to feel so much better when it's done. So even though I never really love to clean the toilet, I always feel so much better when it is done. So you're going to need to rely on some of that inner strength to do those few things that you still can't find a way to make them fun. You're going to need to learn how to do those things anyway. This is maybe a little bit of tough love, and this is something that I personally need to hear quite often. So if you struggle with this, you're not alone. But many disorganized people struggle to be completely honest with themselves, and they struggle to face reality. And here's what I mean by that. Okay, so let's say that I have committed to going to bed with all my dishes washed every night, which could be a great goal for just keeping the kitchen tidy. And also I feel like it is a habit that breeds other habits, because then, if I start the morning and then everything's dirty and then I can't cook a healthy breakfast, and then, it just kind of, it creates a negative snowball, versus having the kitchen ready to go the next morning creates positive momentum. So this is very important. So say I decide this, but I've had a long day. I'm not feeling great. I've got a sinus headache and I really just want to get in bed. And there's a few dishes waiting for me. And here's what I tend to do. I really don't want to just be like, nope, I'm not going to wash those. This habit isn't important to me anymore. Like, that feels really bad. Like, you feel bad about yourself. You don't want to say no. So instead, I try to craft some scenario in my head that doesn't actually match with reality. So instead I say, well, I know I said I was going to wash those dishes every night before I go to bed, but actually, you know what? I think it might even be better that I wait until the morning, because I need these additional 6 minutes of sleep, right? I mean, they say sleep is good for you. And then, I'll feel more refreshed and ready to go. And so I'll somehow just convince myself that waiting until tomorrow is the better choice, when it truly isn't the better choice, because then I'm going to wake up in the morning. And I'm sorry, but those extra 6 minutes didn't make me bound out of bed with energy. I know I'm not a morning person. So again, this, just not. So I know I don't have the energy to do those dishes. A couple more dishes have been added by now. And it sets the whole morning off on the wrong foot. And often I don't even do them in the morning. I kind of knew that. Like, if I've been really honest with myself, I knew that the night before, but I just didn't want to have to say, I'm just not going to do them. And so then it becomes later in the day, and then by the next night I have more, and it just creates a negative snowball. And this is just one example of how sometimes we aren't completely transparent with ourselves. And so the more you can just be completely honest, and if you're not going to do them, just say, nope, I'm not going to do them. You don't have to justify it. and come up with a story about how it's actually not that bad or it's actually better. Just get in the habit of really looking at things realistically. Also, our schedules. I can be very not realistic when it comes to deciding what I can take on, what I can get done this week. Well, yeah, I can probably do that project and this project. That's not actually the case. I really could only probably do 2 of those projects. So really learning to be really realistic with yourself about what's actually best for you and about what you can accomplish. This is going to sound maybe a little bit strange, but a lot of people you might look at and not necessarily think they're very organized are actually organized in their own way. So a lot of times we get into our head that an organized space needs to look a very specific way, but that's not necessarily true. In order for a space to be organized, everything just needs to have a home, and you need to know where that home is. So you might do that through like matching bins with labels and something that looks very traditionally organized, or you might do that with something that maybe doesn't even look as neat and streamlined and tidy, but everything still does have a home and you know where that is. And some of the most efficient people I know don't necessarily look organized, but they actually are because they know where things are and they know how to get things done. So make sure that you don't confuse being organized with needing to look a very specific way. Now that you know the habits of disorganized people, let's think about what it is that organized people actually do that help them stay organized. And I made a video about this recently that I will link down below, so you can go ahead and check that one out next.